Good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are. Welcome to Bold Voices for W. I'm Khadija Haliru. Thank you for being here. Today we begin our December series, The Shift, The Rise, The Becoming. This episode is about identity, who you are, where you were before you migrated, and who you become afterwards. I'm going to share my story in detail so we can all reflect on the role we play in each other's versions of ourselves. Because how we treat one another has a lot to do with who we become. I want to remind you that if you're watching on YouTube, hit subscribe. If you're listening on any podcast platform, please follow us on your favorite platform. It helps us to keep creating this content. Now, let me start with who I am or who I was before I migrated. I was a young woman already navigating a life. I got married, and immediately after my final year university exams, I was a married woman. Choosing who to marry was kind of difficult, but my husband was chosen because my family knew him very well, and I trusted my father's judgment more than my own. In a culture where it's better the devil you know than the angel you don't know, I was a daddy's girl. Anything I did needed his blessing. That with his approval, I believed I would be fine, no matter what life threw at me. And I still believe his blessing has made me navigate life purely. Speaking of my dad, he was the best example of a husband I saw, you know, because of that, I thought I understood what a husband's role should be in my life. I didn't expect challenges as much. I had watched my parents love deeply. They had challenges, but they respected each other honestly with transparency. So I got married and I had to move miles away from home, from Zaria in the north of Nigeria to Lagos in the southwest. Before we tied the knot, I remember telling my husband my immediate goals: to complete my master's quickly and settle into a job so that starting a family won't delay me. During my youth service year, which is that mandatory 1 year Nigerian graduates have to spend in serving their country, I had my first baby. The days were beautiful, and I was settling in nicely. I remember telling my sister-in-law how much more I was falling in love with my husband. I had, felt that I made the right decision at that time. But soon after the baby arrived, I found myself questioning my husband's hesitation towards me for most things, for me getting a job or even starting a business. In university, I was used to selling things to get by and turned to selling gold earrings as a way of multiplying whatever money my dad gave me, you know, that would sustain me whenever he traveled unexpectedly, because he was a businessman and did a lot of travel. I would invest and liquidate when I needed money and reinvest again when I had surplus. So naturally, I assumed I could continue my entrepreneurial habits, but I had no money. And that was unusual for a new bride. After weddings, couples normally have a stash of cash from gifts and spray money from all those Nigerian weddings. But I had spent all mine in Kano when I was received by my husband's family, and there was a little dance and celebration. I felt the need to spray others with my money. I sprayed on familiar faces, my new in laws, and it felt good at the moment. And that was it. But I was surprised, you know? What surprised me, though, was how much cash my husband returned with after the wedding. I was asked, you know, why isn't he spraying you during the wedding? And I thought he didn't have enough, and that's why he wouldn't. So I asked, how did you manage that? Because at our dance, my uncle had to give you some money to spray me. He slid that cash into your pocket so, you wouldn't be embarrassed or you wouldn't embarrass yourself. So it made no sense that he had bundles of money left when we came back. That was the first red flag for me, one that would set the tone for how I would feel whenever I was told or made to assume that there was not enough. Still, I continued to look for work because I realized I needed my own money. And while I was waiting, I kept coming up with some business ideas, from launching hibiscus drink my uncle once suggested I do because I did it so nicely, to starting a lingerie business where I'd sell pants and bras and underwear to friends, in their workplaces. I would drive around with them in my car. And I actually began to make some money. And then my husband suggested I travel to Senegal to buy Christmas gifts for his office that year. That wasn't my suggestion, but I went, returned with the items. Of course, I made a margin, and that profit helped me get started in my business ventures. But a pregnancy derailed my progress because I became very sick during that pregnancy. And the second red flag appeared when, despite all my efforts selling clothing items, some customers didn't pay fully. My inability to follow up while sick was used against me and became ammunition to label me as incompetent, as someone unworthy of more. At this time, I didn't have a car. Of course, my husband had two cars. One was parked luxury E class for leisure, and each time he upgraded his car, he never really was ready to get me one yet. Perhaps I wasn't worthy of one yet. So I tagged along with him everywhere while desperately searching for work because I believed in myself. Meanwhile, looking like a trophy, being dragged around. To outsiders, the cars made us look well off, but I found it hard to even ask much for money to do my hair or personal, shopping. Even shopping for my baby at 7 months pregnancy required me calling my father to explain that I needed him to help me get my husband to understand that getting to the store before fatigue setting was important. That was my third red flag, that I actually needed help to do that because it was a series of arguments to make him understand. He thought I had just had a baby 2 years earlier. Of course, there were things that should be reused. He didn't see the need for me to get any new stuff. He told me when I confided in my sister in law that I found it odd he wasn't generous with me or given by nature. She told me to be patient, that one day he would surprise me. This was long before a wave of career growth that boosted his wealth. Then came our first family trip to Switzerland. He spent heavily on himself, and I was shocked to see how he almost spent nothing on me. He stayed in the hotels all the time doing research on the best watches to buy, and we went out only on the days we went searching for the one watch he still wears today. I remember the day he bought it. I was freezing, begging for a hat or a cashmere scarf. Wow, he forgot that I wasn't even well dressed for this winter weather, and I needed those two items. I had to stop my feet halfway to say, I won't be following you into any other shop unless you get me this. And I stood right in front of a shop that had exactly what I needed. And that was all I got in Geneva. And then on to France, where they gave me just $300 to shop for whatever I wanted. When you travel and your partner spends over 3,000 on himself and hands you a $300 stipend, it stings. When we returned, however, I was finally told I could pursue my master's. Got excited, but after securing admission, I was denied the opportunity because he said my aunt advised it would be too much to do with two kids. Note, I was only 4 months pregnant at the time of this travel, and I only had the one kid. But refusing me to go to school in January, and then in April comes my baby. I had my baby and lost my baby the same day, just 4 hours later. Many thought it was an April Fool's joke because he came April 1st, 2000. Pregnancy had been stressful. Small arguments over things I needed. Job that I was searching for, begging him to help me find one, not having a car for emergencies, waiting an hour for the office driver to come get me for antenatal visits. Simple things that turned into big things. There was even one day I felt quite faint after returning from my antenatal. Without a car, I had walked a little bit to get a taxi, and then got back, felt quite faint. When he opened the door to see my househelp fanning me to keep me conscious, instead of asking, "Are you okay?" he lashed out about why she was fanning me. That was my first red flag. At this stage in my marriage, I was not happy. I was only grateful that he wasn't stingy with food, at least. He loved food so much that he hired a chef even at the time when I was completely broke and wondered. I knew I could cook and he didn't need to cook, but sometimes I wondered if he was just simply living out his childhood dream of having one someday. This was me then, confused, hurt, exhausted, and then came the mindset shift. I cannot do this. Or can I do this and still be myself? The answer was yes. So, to those of you thinking, whatever you're going through, whether it's temporary right now or you just want to overcome a specific time, your mindset just have to change to accept and figure out a solution. And so my solution was it. Yes, I'll figure it out. So after losing my baby, I asked I asked for time away with family. We were building a second home nearing completion, so it was perfect timing to go to Kano. Kano was his hometown to oversee the final touches and stay with his mom. Once I got to Kano, I applied for a master's and decided to start a grocery store right there in my home at the little, you know, guardhouse that we had in front. It was strategic. I knew money wouldn't flow to me, and I needed to cover for myself because I didn't want anyone knowing my secrets. The grocery store grew quickly. The guard assisted, very excited. And from his small profits, I could give gifts to people without needing to ask him like a beggar, you know. But it was short lived. He wanted me back in Lagos after my classes had started. There was a short lecturer's strike, but that gave him the perfect opportunity to insist I return. It was furious. I was furious. Oh, I was furious. I returned to Lagos and soon got pregnant again. This time I demanded to have the baby in England because I was scared and I wanted thorough medical care. He agreed. My baby was born in London and I returned quickly to Kano again to have support. When I returned to Lagos, I was determined to take control of my life because guess what? In London, I had been financially restricted. Family friends were managing the money for me and it felt like prison, like my husband didn't trust me. Back home, I needed to hold my fate in my hands. So by January, I finally got my dream job. Loved it. I was excelling and already being considered for a promotion within 6 months. I was eyeing this supervisory position that I thought I could, successfully achieve. The first day my husband drove me to work, he suddenly believed I needed a nicer car. I looked around our parking lot and said, "You need a new car." He had recently bought one for me and shipped it to Kano. And I had just returned the car because now that I started work, my son needed a car to go to school. I had hired help. I had hired a driver and left them with the car, and he would take me to work. So all of a sudden, my cute older model that I adored wasn't good enough. But seeing the parking lot at work, I said I needed a brand new one. And less than 6 months later, he got me a brand new car. When I asked for money instead to invest in my business, he basically refused and still bought the car. I truly hated that car very much. 6 months into the job, he announced he had planned for us to leave the country. As I was really excited at my job, he saw a different me, happy, excited, and earning money and gaining my independence. But he planned for us to leave the country. He wanted to go for his MBA. I felt relief instead. Maybe he would go first, and then I would find my way to go after, or for him to come back. But I was shocked when he explained he wanted us all to move to the States as part of an immigration plan. What do you think my answer was? A resounding no. I just got started with my new job. I was doing well. I was looking at potential for growth. But he reported me to my dad, afraid that I really didn't want to go with him. And so here, my dad trying to convince me, and I said, listen, I just need 6 more months, 1 year at this job. I'm okay to resign, but I need the experience because I know I need it for anywhere. I'm going to get a job again. So I did. I ended up staying here and leaving my job exactly 1 year later. And here, I want to highlight the little incidences over, few years of marriage that shaped me into who I became even before I traveled. Because when I immigrated, I didn't just move countries, I moved identities. I didn't know it then, but the first thing that changed was my sense of self. What part of your identity changed the most after you migrated? I want to hear it in the comments. Let me know. And don't forget to follow on YouTube and subscribe and listen to wherever you listen to your podcast. Because for me, it was my confidence. Suddenly, everything felt unfamiliar. Questioned my voice, my presence, my place in the world. And I decided I was going to own my place in the world. Because the experience I had before then was that if I wasn't willing to do anything, I was going to permanently lose my voice. Because at that point, I spent 3 years in the US as a housewife, supporting a student, finishing his MBA after 2 years and 1 year of optical practical training, optional practical training is what they call it, the extra year of work you do. All that happened before we migrated to Canada. Those 3 years in the States, I silenced my boldness. I muted the part of me that knew exactly who she was, just to fit, just to survive, and just to avoid standing out. But identity is not given by geography. Identity is given by God. And when I reconnected with Him and myself, definitely found myself again. The Follow Bold Voices podcast, wherever you listen, because next Monday, we're going to talk about what families truly endure abroad, the chapter nobody posts online. Stay bold, stay grounded. See you next week. And thank you for listening.